So our visions for racial justice, well, I'm actually the new Diocesan Racial Justice Officer, so I'm completely new to the role. Personally, I would love to see genuine, real equality, not the segregated kind of equality, not the racist equality, not the best kind of equality, which is actually virtue signalling. I want to see a genuine equality, which is genuine connections between real people. And I feel as if I have this utopian vision of what it means to have racial justice. However, I know that having God in my life means that justice has to be served, and it's there for us to obviously reach out and make sure that we do see that true justice. We've got Julie here, who is the chair of the Racial Justice Forum. So what is your opinion on the vision for racial justice?
We've come a long way since the unit was created, and we called it a forum at the beginning. It was on the back of the killing of George Floyd. So it was formed through, if you like, through the feeling of anger, frustration. But we've moved on from that. We haven't moved on from the feeling of George Floyd. We haven't moved on from the fact that we still feel suffocated and oppressed. We haven't moved on from that, because that's really important to call out. But we've moved on in terms of forming, now to norming, and now to taking action. One of the agenda for the Racial Justice Unit is the Lament to Action. We're now working with the sponsors of the forum. So Bishop Julie is our key sponsor for the forum. She's now supporting us in ensuring that the actions from the Lament to Action, the implementation of those actions, are fulfilled within the diocese. There is a heck of a lot of work to do in this space. But in terms of racial justice, equity and inclusion are the key parts of it. We can't be successful in this diocese in moving the dial without everybody being in this space. So racial justice for me is all about the empowerment of everyone, all within clergy, all within the diocese, all within the congregation, to ensure that we all feel like we belong, and we all feel that we have equity, and we are all included in the conversations that are happening within the diocese.
So it's really interesting. You've taken a couple of words that were running around in my head, particularly around equity as opposed to equality, because that idea of equal chances, things being made so that everyone has that opportunity to achieve the same things or have their voice heard in the same way, and trying to move the goalpost. And I think the idea of racial justice is a utopian thing, like you said before, Nadene, but it's something to move forward with deliberately and thoughtfully, and by engaging across whatever spheres of work we're actually involved in, because I think this isn't something which is channeled or just works through our siloed roles within the jobs that we do. I think this is something to network and to use those opportunities to say, there's some great practice over there, we should be adopting that. How do we make this more widespread? How do we bring in those people who've never engaged with this to make it become more normalised, to make sure that this is part of the furniture? And I think this is what's missing. It's that idea that it shouldn't be a battle. This shouldn't be a fight anymore. This should be something which people say, I see the reason and I'm with you on that journey as well. So.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And my view as well is similar to yours, where it's kind of like an ideology for racial justice. Obviously, I would love for everybody to look at each other as the image bearers of the one who brought everything into existence, and to actually have that love and reverence for God enough to be able to share that love to, everybody that he created. Because I do really believe that if you do not see yourself in that way, and you don't see others in that way, and you see them as different from you, or you see them as lesser than you, that's when you have instances that happened to George Floyd, for example, where you're able to justify the mistreatment, the abuse, or even the eradication sometimes, We've seen it throughout history. We've seen it with the Israelites being enslaved in Egypt. We've seen it with the transatlantic slave trade from West Central Africa to the Americas and the Caribbeans, and we've seen it, with the Nazi regime against the Jewish people group. I think, for me, ideally, racial justice is people looking at others no matter the amount of melanin they have, no matter what culture they come from, and they see them with the love that Jesus came to tell us, the love that he brought down from the kingdom of God, that is, we should be kind of helping to move along in whatever way that we can. That's really my idea of racial justice, but I see that there's a long way before we get to that point.
Definitely a long way, and I agree definitely with the idea of erasure, which has been part of history, and the fact that a lot of the things that we have done for history has just been completely erased, and people don't seem to want to reinitiate what actually happens, the true facts, because that is part of debunking the history. It just makes people very uncomfortable, as you've already said. But it's our role, it's up to us to be those people who are implementing racial justice into every feature that we can. Obviously, we're just 4 people here, but I think it's essential to use our voices to really get that message across as well.
But I think there's an awful lot of empathy with that point of view. I mean, you've only got to look at the events in Bristol, with bringing down the statues. That wasn't carried out necessarily by black people, by people of colour. That was a whole range of people. And that is probably more emblematic of this country and more widely than you realise. It's just where the power sits doesn't necessarily move things along as quickly.
Yeah.
And, there are political machinations that maybe are barriers to that as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and it's also the rhetoric. There are a lot of people that hold power that have to be responsible for the rhetoric that they put out there, because it can either take a whole generation backwards or it can propel a whole generation forwards. The riots of this summer, 2024, was appalling, and it was an eye-opener. It was an eye-opener that we are not having the right conversations within our communities. So people have narratives that they believe because the voices of the people that want to take us back are louder. So everyone now needs to speak up, because our children, everybody's children are being taught on the streets. And if we don't speak out like we're speaking now, if we don't, again, back to the narrative, if we don't have the conversations about the narrative, the true narrative of what's happening, then somebody else will tell the story. So for me, racial justice is about truth.